Go.
Okay, there we go. All right, hi everyone, and welcome to this week's DPT Student Chat. Today is Wednesday, August 6th, and we are here currently with two APTA fellows, Drs. Nancy Kirsch and Dr. Pamela Duffy, and we will soon be joined by Dr. Rob Landell. So I will just go ahead and let you two introduce yourselves for right now, and we'll catch up with Dr. Landell when he arrives. Nancy, would you like to get started?
Sure. I'm Nancy Kirsch, and I'm the program director at the DPT program at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, and very happy to be here with everybody.
Yes, thank you.
And my name is Pam Duffy, and I teach as an assistant professor in the Master of Public Health program at Des Moines University, and we're an academic medical center with 9 programs, and while we have a DPT program and I give guest lectures there, I sit right in the MPH program and I love it.
Fantastic. So in order to be a fellow of the APTA and to receive such the highest honor really in our profession, that includes success and really that you've made a lot of progress and contributed to our profession in 4 areas: practice, advocacy, education, and research. And so my first question to you all is, where did you get your start? What do you think started you on the path to where you are today, and how did you get here?
Who would you like to start?
Whoever wants to start can start.
Well, I'll start, and I can say that I'm just incredibly honored to have been inducted as a fellow, and I'm a new fellow, and I really think I got my start, well, I know I got my start on the shoulders of giants, people that were established in the field, whose names you may not recognize, but they were solid clinicians and really started doing research and looking for evidence before anybody knew what research was or evidence was. They really were trailblazers in the field. They dragged me off to my first APTA meeting when I started work. I was working at Kessler Institute in West Orange, and they just, picked me up and said, "You're going." And next thing I knew, I was a delegate at the House of Delegates and secretary of the chapter and on to be president eventually. And it was all because another PT cared to take me along and show me a path and was a mentor. So that's where I got, and hopefully I can do that for others as well.
Thanks, Nancy. I would have to say that I started really interested in practice, and primarily orthopedic practice, and wanting to be a practice owner. And for me, it was all about giving the best patient care and getting patients better as fast as I could, and making sure that they didn't come back to see me, that we got them better for good, or good for better. And I had a lot of mentors as a clinician, and then as I was in the profession for a while, I started wanting to learn more about what was considered quality of care and standards of care, and what policies with either payers or in practice acts made a difference for professions and for patients to access care. So for me, advocacy, policy, and patient care were all intertwined. I'm incredibly humbled to be a fellow, and like Nancy, as a student, had many mentors and role models like Jane Carlin and Eugene Michaels, and individuals that really, when I was in school, were considered kind of the grandmothers and grandfathers of physical therapy, and that helped encourage me to just strive to do the best that I could. And being involved in the association was just not considered an option. It was a requirement. And I learned at an early age as a student that that's what I wanted to do too.
And I'll just take a quick moment and introduce and welcome Dr. Landell. Thank you for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself? Uh-oh. Can you guys hear him?
No. If you go up to the top, it looks like your mic might be muted. So if you go on to the top, you should be able to click to unmute it. Nope.
And I'll try to fix this.
There you go.
There we go. We're in business. Welcome.
Hey, Rob, good to have you.
Do we have a lag?
Potentially.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't we move on to the next two questions with the two of you that are kind of connections working well, and we'll just integrate Dr. Landell as those come along. So how what would you say to individuals that are just getting started? I know that APTA membership is not as high as it could be. How would you encourage other people to get more involved in the APT and in their local chapters that might be hesitant to do so?
Pam, you want to start this one?
Be happy to. I think what I gained from membership early on, well, there were two things. One was just the information, what you're finding out about the profession. Whether it's from a clinical standpoint or it's a payment standpoint. And then secondly, just the networking opportunities. I think all of the positions I held, either at a hospital or contracts in practice or other positions later on, are, for me, happened because someone made me aware of it, or I was talking with somebody and they helped me see either a different path or an opportunity that I might not have seen on my own. So I think you just can't underestimate the value of the relationships that you establish, and that's the primary reason to get involved in the association, in my point of view.
And I can't believe that people aren't members of the association, so I have to remind myself that they have a reason for not being a member, and I have to find out what that is and then do whatever I can do to help them understand why they need to be a member. Because we have to stay connected, and if we disconnect and are not part of the association, we're just so far removed from knowing what the practice is, from knowing what's happening around us. And from a perspective in terms of regulating PTs, you find so often that the PTs that get into trouble are often not association members because they just are kind of floating out there. So we really need to help one another, and I don't fault people for not being members. I fault myself for not finding out why and helping them to understand the value.
This is kind of an open-ended question to either of you, but have you seen membership improve? Has it stayed pretty stagnant?
It's actually increasing, which is a good sign. And I attribute that to you guys. I think you're finding out early that it's important to be a member and to connect any way that you can. And I think that that's really a good sign for the future.
Nancy, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think this generation of PT students brings such energy, and they're not like my generation of baby boomers who just ended up being joiners or felt an obligation to do it. the students of today are there because they have a passion around what they want to do for patients and for society, and I really admire that. And we're seeing good increase in membership in the younger physical therapists in the Midwest.
Absolutely. Looks like Rob is back. There he is.
Yeah.
Can you hear me though?
Yes.
We can. So, Dr. Landell, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Dr. Rob Landell. I'm the program director at University of Southern California for both the DPT programs and the residency programs. We have 4 residencies, one each in orthopedic, sports, neurology, and pediatric physical therapy. So I run both of those programs.
Okay, so Nancy and Pam already covered this question, so can you tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are right now as a fellow?
Well, I'm also a relatively new fellow, and I am still sort of looking over my shoulder and wondering if they're going to rescind the offer, you know.
That happens? I'm scared.
Yeah, I keep thinking they're going to just take it back. They made a mistake. But I've been very active in APTA as far as the residency education and special certification processes go. In the late mid 90s or so, I started writing questions for the orthopedic specialist certification exam, and then moved my way up until I was on the Orthopedic Specialty Council, which is the group that manages the orthopedic specialist certification examination itself. And we also manage all the recertifications. And while I was doing that, I've been at USC since 1988 and started our faculty practice here with the idea that we would start a residency eventually. And in 1998, we had our first residents go through the program. In 1999, we were credentialed. And I guess I asked so many questions about the process that as soon as we got credentialed, they invited me to be on the credentialing committee. So I was one of the early people involved in the process of getting residency programs credentialed. And at that time, we had, I think, 13 programs, 13 residencies, and maybe 4 or 5 fellowships. During my tenure, we grew to 39, and now we have, I think, over 160 programs. So it's really exploded since I was that involved in it. And but you know, at that time, we were sort of figuring out the process and getting it all started and defining what credentialing was and so on. Now it's matured to the point where we actually have a board, and the board has 2 components: one which credentials new programs, and the other which helps aspiring programs to develop and become credentialed.
I'm going to take a kind of a spin-off of what you just finished with, Dr. Landell, and what do you, all 3 of you, see as some of the most important components of a successful physical therapy program? What does that look like? It's really broad on purpose, so you can take it wherever you'd like to go with that.
I can answer. I can start, I guess. I think obviously you need to have the facilities, the resources, and the facilities include the physical plant and then also the faculty. Faculty are you can get by with and improvise if you don't have all the tools that you need, but you really need to have a strong faculty. So I think that's probably number 1. Physical resources is number 2. We're very fortunate here. We do have a faculty practice, so our faculty are involved in clinical practice as well. And I think our residency programs really play a huge role in our DPT education because the residents teach in the program. That's part of their residency, number 1. And what that does is it allows the students to see what they can aspire to do once they graduate. They can aspire to something beyond just getting their degree, but go into post-professional education. But it also, our residents also educate us about where practice is, and we can see them in our practices or in their practical or their clinical sites. And it informs us as far as what our curriculum needs to include. And I think that's a huge component of what it is that we do here. So, I think those are you guys can add it into that, I'm sure, but those three components I think are critical.
Well, I would certainly agree with all of those, and I think having faculty practice is really important to keep the faculty connected to clinical practice. Also, having a student-run clinic, I think, is a really critical element. Having the students take the ownership of a clinic and do the administrative components of it, as well as providing the interventions. And a student-run clinic, our student-run clinic is a direct access clinic, so that the students get the opportunity to practice in a very independent way right at the beginning. And we have a mentorship program where the second-year students work with the first-year students and kind of team treat in the student-run clinic. So I think that just having that opportunity to practice every single week before you're even going out onto your first clinical is really critical. And I think the other thing is just a dynamic curriculum. As Rob just said, the ability for the curriculum to meet what the needs are in practice and be able to change, and having that driven by a very dynamic but very stable faculty, I think is also really critical.
And I'm going to add a couple of things that programs may be doing now, but this may be a little futuristic because I certainly agree with what my colleagues have said. But I think there needs to be an orientation towards community health and to understanding social determinants of health. And most of the physical therapists I know and students are not aware that there are many determinants of how healthy a person is that have nothing to do with biology, have nothing to do with their genes or their genetic makeup, and have nothing to do with the personal health choices they make. It may have to do with their socioeconomic status, their employment, their environment, their housing, and their nutrition, and a number of things. And this is not outside the scope of physical therapy to understand how to help participate in improving the health of communities. So that's what I'd like to challenge programs to start looking at, and looking at population health. The other piece is providing an opportunity for students, and maybe not as a requirement, but to experience serving underserved populations, and some student-run clinics do that, and to have global health opportunities, whether they're in the United States or actually traveling to other countries. I think it's very broadening.
Do the two of you have other suggestions of what you would like to see more in increasing how effective PT schools can be in the future? I think those are some great suggestions by Dr. Duffy.
Well, I think our student-run clinic does do exactly what Dr. Duffy's talking about in terms of serving a greatly underserved population in inner city Newark. And we also have an outreach program where right now actually we have students in India this 2-week period, and in the winter we go to the Dominican Republic. So we have the opportunity to work within the country as well as outside the country. But I think some of the things that we really have to look at are some changes in how, perhaps in clinical education and in broadening the clinical education experiences that our students have, so that they have more opportunities to practice in areas that we aren't currently practicing in.
So we have a couple questions from Twitter that I'm going to interject with. from kind of a combination from TJ Janicki and Lauren Keeley to other DPT students. TJ asks, as lifelong members of the APTA, how has the professional association contributed to your professional growth? And to build on that, Lauren would like to know if you think APTA membership should be required of professionals.
A profession is made up of professionals. We have this discussion every few years on the faculty, and we require our first-year students to become members, but after that, it's up to them. There is a lot of peer pressure to become members, but what we try to sell is the advantages of being a member. For me, I wouldn't be where I am today without the APTA. In terms of professional development, I mean, that was where I got a lot of my early professional development, was through conferences, state meetings, district, state, and national meetings. The networking that is available to you when you go to all these meetings is huge. You meet people that are doing things that oh wow, that's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? And you go back and you try things and see what works, and it's really invaluable to be a member. Not all those things are tangible. I think too many people are looking for the tangible benefits. I mean, there are tangible benefits, discounts on Con Ed and discounts on conferences and so on. But it really goes beyond those tangible things into the intangibles. And but as far as requiring, membership, my personal feeling is that you can't require someone to be part of a volunteer army, which is kind of what APTA is.
So I also don't think I'd be anywhere without APTA, and I think it's as integral to my professional life as kind of wearing my skin. It's just part of who and what I am. As far as, I feel very strongly about not requiring membership and not paying for membership once people are working. I think it's a professional responsibility that somebody has to take on themselves. But again, as I said before, I think it's really critical that those of us that are members find out why people are not members and help them to understand what the benefits are of membership.
Everything that has come to me in terms of professional opportunities, I would have to go back to the influence of my peers in the association at the chapter level or district level, and the leadership development that occurs when you get involved in your own professional development and learning about practice or practice acts and getting involved in a common cause was very important to me. And representing the profession, whether it's at the state capitol or in front of an insurance company, all of that was possible for me because of either my local chapter or the American Physical Therapy Association. As far as requiring membership, I have to agree with Rob and Nancy, because I see all too often that when the membership is required, that then after graduation occurs, the student individual doesn't really appreciate or value it because they didn't select it, they don't have any stake in it, they're not invested in it. So I think instilling the importance of it, the value, you can role model this, you can create opportunities, but ultimately it's up to that individual to pay their membership dues and to attend some meetings and get involved where they can.
Dr. Kirsch, before we started the chat live, you were telling Laura and I about your upcoming trip to Alaska, which I think is a great example of changes that you can make via involvement. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I'd like to say that I was going to Alaska to go on a cruise or something really exciting, but not the case. But it actually is just as exciting. I have been invited to serve on a panel along with the medical representatives from medicine and from emergency medicine. The three groups are going to be speaking to the meeting of the Council of State Governments. And we've been asked to speak on having licensure compacts and looking at having a license that would be, you'd have a primary license in the state in which you care to be licensed in, but in any compact state that agrees with the rules of the compact, you would be able to practice in those states. And we're so mobile as a profession, we're so mobile in order to allow patients to have the most access that they possibly can have, that it's critical that we start to really think about having not national licensure, but licensure that allows you to cross across state boundaries, and particularly with where we're heading with telehealth, without having some sort of more fluid licensure, it's going to be very difficult to really come up to speed with telehealth. So we're trying to get this started and see if we can get moving in this area. And APTA is working with the Federation of State Boards of Physical Therapy to see between the state chapters and the licensing boards if we can get this across the 53 jurisdictions.
Do either of you have any success stories of things that you've seen happen throughout your careers because of advocacy?
You mean like legislative advocacy?
Mm-hmm. Or something that happened within your program, just anything where advocacy was involved?
We, in California, we just got, as of January 1st, we have direct access.
Woohoo!
Yeah. Exactly. Huge battle. Been going on for decades, literally decades. We had restricted direct access since 1972, I want to say. You could evaluate, but you could not treat without a diagnosis. And then as of January 1st, we have 12 visits or 45 days. Huge battle. Still controversial because included in that bill was the ability of professional medical corporations to hire and employ physical therapists, which some view as an issue with physician-owned practices. So there's a big split in the state membership, still is, but that's a battle that's been going on for so long. You know, it's basically my whole professional career, which you can tell from the gray has been a long time. So yeah, I'm very pleased to have had that happen while I've been around.
Just as an aside, Rob, I had members in California calling me in Iowa asking my opinion about the proposed legislation, and I did some communication with other people to try to learn more because it became divisive within the California Physical Therapy Association from what I could understand. I think I've learned over the years that sometimes the best compromise has to be made, and it seemed to me that the chapter was doing that. And when I spoke with some experts around the type of definitions of medical corporations and so on you had in California, it seemed to me that the best compromise was struck.
I think that is the case. The main reason it's a sorry, can you still hear me?
Yes.
It's a very complicated issue, but basically California is looking to whoa, I don't know what just happened there. Okay, California is looking to we have our own insurance exchange in order to comply with the Affordable Care Act, and they're looking at the establishment of accountable care organizations, or ACOs, as a way to save money, in the healthcare market. And if you can't, if a medical corporation or if a corporation cannot hire and employ physical therapists, PTs are going to be left out in the cold when the ACOs get going. Without this bill, actually, my understanding, and believe me, I'm not a lawyer or a legislator, but my understanding is that ACOs would be unable to hire PTs. And basically the way ACOs work is there's going to be a chunk of money given to a group to provide care for a patient. So let's say you have a total knee replacement, and they're going to give a chunk of money that will cover the surgery, the pre-op, the hospital, everything, including the rehab. And it's much easier to give that chunk of money to one group than it is to try to pay the doctors in the hospital, and then the nurses and whoever else, anesthesiologists, and the PTs. And so they're going to look for one-stop shopping, and that's where the ACOs come into play. And if the ACOs can't hire PTs, then where are the patients going to go for their rehab? And so this was a legislative attempt to try to save money and kind of get everybody together into one group.
I think that was a good explanation, Rob, and part of the purpose of accountable care organizations, that's the ACOs, is to try to, through regulation, bring providers together to communicate and work together for the most efficient and the highest quality of care for patients. And that should result in savings to the healthcare system. So I hope this all works out for the PTs in California. I think time will, it's my prediction, time will show that this was the right decision.
I hope so. I hope so. The trade-off for the private practices is they're worried about, of course, physician-owned practices. And, of course, we have a big push to ask therapists not to work for physicians. But, you know, there are some that are going to do that, and you can't, you know, I guess you can't stop that. But when the private practices are worried about the competition from physician-owned practices, because the physicians can refer patients to themselves or basically to a clinic they own, which is referring it to their own place. What we were hoping is that, number one, we can get referral for profit laws in place that will prevent that from happening. Number two, we're hoping that with direct access you can offset the loss of patients that are occurring because of you know, these referral for profit situations. You can offset that by going directly to the public and marketing directly to the public. You know, much like Big Pharma does with medications.
Why aren't we seeing more advertising kind of in larger areas, like larger media outlets? I think it's starting to increase, but do you all have kind of an idea of like why that is?
I don't. I wish I did. It's expensive. I mean, that's,
okay.
you know, it's expensive,
Yeah.
and you know, I think if you ask the average APTA member, they say their dues are pretty high. You know, if we really want to get a campaign going, it would cost money, a lot of money. So that's part of it. I think also PTs in general don't take, or could take, I should say, a larger role in marketing themselves and marketing the profession. So, for example, you know, you could write, you know, 80% of the news is manufactured, so you could write an article and submit it to the health section of your local newspaper, and you know, you go down to the health fairs and hey, and put up a booth for, you know, physical therapists. You know, those are two sort of small ways that we can get physical therapy out there and really promote what it is we do.
I would even say that I think we have to start the marketing on a one-on-one basis. You know, Principle 8D of our Code of Ethics talks about educating the public, and I think we don't take the advantage to do that enough. We'll say to a patient comes in and says, I only have 3 visits, you know, my insurance company will only allow 3 visits, and instead of saying to them, this is what you need, and here's what I think we can do for you as physical therapists. And by the way, patients can have the option to pay beyond what their insurance company would pay. It's okay to consider that as an option and explain to people what the benefits of physical therapy are. We have to market ourselves patient by patient so that people understand the value of seeing a physical therapist throughout their lifespan.
What I've seen APTA do to a large extent is take advantage of both clinical research and health services research to show the value of physical therapy. And I think it's not just going out and tooting our horn, but it's connecting what we do with value to society and to an individual regarding function or pain and so on. And I've seen more of that over the 30, 40 years that I've been in practice.
Along the lines of marketing our profession, we have another question from TJ Janicki. He asks, if I were a patient with no knowledge of physical therapy, how would you describe what physical therapy is and what we do? Dr.
Well,
Kirsch, do you want to
physical therapists are there to help you do what you want to do in your life. And that would be the bottom line, helping you to understand how to set goals, or if you're having pain or any types of difficulty accomplishing what you want to do, a physical therapist can evaluate you and help establish a plan to get there.
I agree. I think that that's a good basic understanding of what we do, is helping meeting people where they are and taking them to where they want to be. But it requires a lot of education, and it requires us partnering with the patient in order to accomplish that.
I don't have anything to add. Those are both perfect. I will say I'm gonna step out for just a second. I'm gonna be right back. I apologize.
Sure. Sounds good. So going off kind of. Oh, go ahead.
Laura, you'd asked earlier about successes, and for me, as I think about what went into my nomination to become a fellow this past year, in part, some of the successes were not really me, but me being in a place to work with other physical therapists in Iowa around our legislation. So achieving direct access as the 15th state back in 1991, and also being able to get licensure for physical therapist assistants. And we crafted that after the guidelines at the American Physical Therapy Association. So that was really a win for our state in a couple of ways, because we were able to coalesce a lot of members around some really important issues.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask you all about kind of what significant events you've seen in the therapy profession, and like what you see as having such a large impact most recently, or further back, just on the profession that you've seen during your time.
Well, I think for a profession that's not yet 100 years old, we have come an extremely long way in a very short time. We think that we were technicians, and now at the doctoral level, with the last group of students in the master's program graduating in 2017, and at that point we will all be at the doctoral level. We've made tremendous strides in a very, very short period of time. For me personally, one of the opportunities that I had was to help craft our new code of ethics. And, you know, people go, do we really need a code of ethics? Don't we really know how to behave? And yet, when you look at our new code compared to our pre-existing code that was really not drastically different than our initial code, it really talks about so many of the things that we never really saw ourselves as professionals doing. It talks about our responsibility to society. and it talks about our responsibility to be autonomous in terms of our thinking, not in terms of practicing by ourselves, but in terms of our thinking, and taking responsibility for our own practice and our own actions. So I'm very pleased to have been part of that, and I think that just shows how much the profession has grown in such a short period of time. And with Michigan being the 50th state just recently to have gained direct access, we're all there now, so that's terrific.
When I think back to my first physical therapy job at Einstein Northern in Philadelphia, in the hospital, patients with low back pain might be in the hospital for 4 or 6 weeks as inpatients. And Nancy, do you remember that?
They were in traction.
Yeah. There were lots of things that were done in addition to just plain old bed rest. So when I think of the adoption of clinical practice guidelines, and I've been involved recently on the board of directors for the orthopedic section of APTA, and they have been working diligently to collaborate with others and with APTA to get evidence behind what we're doing, and that is just monumental in what we're doing as an autonomous profession. Autonomous in that we can make decisions based on our own clinical judgment, but not exclusive of collaboration with others.
So I have just kind of a fun question for all three of you. If you were starting out as a new PT grad right now, where would you see yourself going?
Wow, that's like there's so many choices. Yeah. That's tough. Well, you know, I tell my students this story all the time that every clinical rotation I went on when I was in school, that's what I was going to do. I was absolutely certain this is what I'm doing, and I just got to get through the rest of school and then I'll be done. And then I'd go on my next one. I go, oh, forget that. I'm not doing that. This is what I want to do. And of course, the last clinical rotation I went on, that's where I ended up working. And luckily for me, it was at Rancho Los Amigos Medical Center, and I had a great experience there. I worked there for almost 3 years. So, you know, I started out in treating neurologic patients, actually treating arthritis, burns, and then adult neuro. And then I went from Rancho to an outpatient orthopedic clinic, and I used a lot of what I'd learned treating neurologically involved patients in my orthopedic, musculoskeletal involved patients. Along the way, when I started our faculty practice, I was looking for referral sources. I got involved in vestibular rehab a long time ago, and that got me into cervicogenic dizziness, and it's just like you could go wherever you want. To me, it's a perfect job to be in an academic situation where I'm at, because I get to see patients, I get to teach, and I'm involved in some research. So, man, I don't know what you guys are gonna have to answer that one. I don't know what I would do.
Good options.
Well, I started out in an inpatient hospital kind of setting, and working, doing what was called at the time chest PT, and great background for learning the cardiovascular and pulmonary systems really, really well, which influenced every other kind of practice. And I was really stuck on just orthopedics and sports, and did that a lot. But I think if I was to go into practice now, it would be with an older population, a geriatric population. I think we were talking before the chat about how rich their stories are, how meaningful their lives have been, how you still continue to learn and grow for as long as you live every day of your life. And that's where I think I would find meaning right now. And I think students would too. So to take it back to your question, I think you would find meaning there also.
So to be perfectly honest, I never would have, I would not get into PT school now. with the competition the way it is. So I don't think I could even go beyond that. But hopefully, they use criteria back from when I did get in, and I would get in, and then I can answer this question. I had the opportunity to practice in pretty much every practice setting at this point, and I had a private practice for over 20 years. And every practice setting I was in, I absolutely loved. And I thought, I could never leave this. It can never be as good as this. It'll never be this good. And I'd go to the next practice setting, and it was just as good. And I think to have a career that has been over 40 years, where I've never gotten up one morning and said I didn't want to go to work. I mean, I might have wanted to sleep a little longer, but I've never not wanted to be there in any setting that I've been in. To say I've never been bored a day of my life, and to have treated from infants in the NICU to geriatrics, there's nothing better in this whole world. So if I could get into a PT program now, I would do the exact same thing all over again.
Great answer. So how can students today be as prepared as possible to enter the workforce and to exemplify kind of those 4 domains that are part of your fellowship designation: the advocacy, practice, education, and research? Do you focus on one for now? How do you balance that? What advice do you have for incoming entry-level PTs? Kind of a tough question.
I think you want to. If I were to go back and do it again, and this is kind of what I did, was I tried to be as clinically sound as I could, and in the end, it comes down to treating your patients and treating them well, and doing your best for them. So I was a Con Ed junkie early on. I took a lot of courses. I tried to be as good as I could be. I still continue to do that. It wasn't until I felt like I was, at least moving in that direction, that I started looking at some of the other areas. Now, this is what I think is great about residency: is it really starts your clinical skills, and at least in our program, we have the residents work on a scholarly project. Generally, it's a case study, but a lot of times they also get involved in the research faculty that we have here and the projects that are going on here. So, so they get the clinical acumen as well as exposure to research and the types of things that they could do. I think we sort of look to our residents to be the clinical experts who are asking the clinical questions that then folks with solid research training can hopefully they can pair up and start to answer those questions. So, but I would say try to get good at one area. Pick the area you want to really excel at. Go for that, and then get that started, and then move into the others. Pam?
I have to agree. I think your own personal scope of practice is where you first concentrate and get comfortable there, but recognizing that the other 3 areas are integral to practice at all times, and so they're all there. So you want to dabble in all of them a little bit. Be a TA at the school that is close to you, for a little bit, and get involved in some clinical research. All of that stuff is being collected all the time, and you've got some opportunities to collect some really big data and really do something with it. And then there's never a time when you can't be involved in advocacy. So pick the primary focus, but realize that the other 3 areas are certainly there all the time.
I'd encourage each student to intentionally think about their strengths and interests and see if there is a mentor that they can form a relationship with, to be on a development track, to have conversations around what's meaningful and how to be challenged, and to really seek out opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't. Someone told me well into my adulthood in practice, when I felt overwhelmed, that mentors are those folks that are going to ask you to do things that you don't think you can do. And lo and behold, time will pass, and you will have accomplished things you never believed you could. So in addition to being really involved in an area of practice that you absolutely love, join a committee at the association and find a mentor.
I just want to add one other thing, and really, clinical practice will probably inform any research that you do, and it'll lead to questions that might become research projects that you do. Clinical practice will allow you to educate your patients, but also if you get into education and are teaching students. So that's, I think that's the foundation of what we do, what physical therapists do, and that's, you want to get as good as you can at that, I think.
And I would also say mentors are incredibly important. But don't always think that the mentor is somebody that is more experienced than you are or older than you are in clinical practice. There's mentors all around you. Had it not been for TJ, I wouldn't know how to tweak. And had it not been for the two of you, I probably would be hanging out in this Google chat room. So mentors are everywhere, and you need to just look around and find the best ones for what we need at that time.
That's so wonderful. I think that this is a great note to end on, all three of you. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us and sharing your knowledge and your experiences. Dr. Kirsch, Landell, and Duffy, do you have any closing last words that you would like to give, or anything that we'd like to address before we close for the night?
I just want to thank you for the invitation. And I'm so honored to be asked to participate in learning how to use this Google Hangout. I'm now going to use it with all of my students that I teach for across the world. So thanks for teaching me something new this evening.
Great, you're welcome.
And thank you for just showing us what a great, terrific future we have ahead with folks like you joining the profession.
I double echo both of those sentiments. Thanks for it's been an honor. I thank you for asking me. I'm actually kind of curious about you two and what your why you're doing this. What is your what was the impetus for you guys getting involved in this? Because I know it's not just these chats. You guys are doing other things, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I just started school 2 months ago, so I did a lot of policy stuff in undergrad, and it's just kind of my nature to get in as involved as possible when I feel passionate about something. So just jumped in as soon as I could.
And Laura?
Well, I'm a third-year student, and one of our professors, Dr. Kendra Gagnon, actually introduced me and my classmates to this Twitter chat that goes on every Wednesday evening, and yeah, just kind of fell into my hands after kind of reaching out to some people, and met Lauren and TJ, and yeah, the rest is history. So just like I think it's really great being able to talk to professionals just throughout the whole nation and students in every state through this. I think it's really neat. And this video will be up on YouTube, so we can watch it later, and students in future classes can reference it back if they ever want to watch it. And apparently, according to Jocelyn, we've got a pretty lively Twitter chat with the hashtag DPT student going on right now watching this video. So you guys are making waves.
You're getting quoted all over the place.
Wonderful.
So you guys will have to check that out after we sign off.
Actually, I'm watching it too. It's kind of,
Oh, are you good?
it's kind of blowing up there. So,
Yeah.
what I hope is that we get a chance to meet in person. So if you're at a meeting, CSM or a national meeting, and I'll speak for me anyway. If you see me, come up to me and introduce yourself, say hi. And I think that's an invitation that I would, anybody who's watching, any PT student who's watching this, I would extend that invitation to any of you to come, because, I think this is cool that we get to talk to, as Nancy said, the future of our profession, the young folks that are up and coming. And so, again, thank you very much for inviting us.
And I look forward to seeing you in Milwaukee.
Here, here. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you all again.
Bye.
Take care.
All right,
Bye.
take care.
Bye.